All right. Well, welcome everybody. So glad to have you. It's 1 o'clock on the dot. Welcome to Property Development and Permitting Resources. I hope I'm not the most tech savvy guy when it comes to Zoom. Some areas I feel like I'm pretty tech savvy, but Zoom, I hope I did this right where we can increase it, where we've increased it from 100 people so that if we need to, I think we ended up with 350 people that said they would like to come, but we'll see how many actual come. But thanks for being here. We're glad you're here. And let me just start with this. My name is Billy Sarno. I currently live in the Gig Harbor area. Just a little bit about me, and then I'll jump in and get to our presenter today. I built my first house in 2008 on 1.3 acres. And it was really just kind of a fun experience with a builder friend of mine. We went to high school together. And I mean that. It was not a bad experience. It really was a good experience. We had some really honest conversations before we started about, how to keep our friendship stronger after the journey was over. And I think those conversations were critical. So built that first house in 2008, then sold it just a couple of years ago. And now I've spent the last 12 months getting 2 lots on a lake, a little lake in Gig Harbor called Lake Sylvia, getting those all permitted, the survey, the wetland, the septic design. We had to go through a variance process because we were building into a wetland buffer. And then along the way, as I was building these, actually years ago or a while ago, I met a good friend of mine named Rick Wilkerson, who's a really respected septic designer in the Pierce County area. And Rick was the one who designed the septic system for these 2 lots that I'm developing. One's going to be my own house, and then I might be selling or building another one and for rental on the other lot. Currently that lot's on the market, actually, just because I'm looking at maybe just selling the lot, see what happens with that. But anyway, as I developed these 2, he's a good friend, and we were working through the process with that. And then Rick introduced me to Matt Sweeney. And Matt, we all got together at Mod Pizza and sat down at Mod and just got to know each other. And I got to learn a little bit more about Matt. And Matt is an attorney in the Pierce County area. He's a real estate attorney. And Matt does things really, I'll let him speak for himself, but it seems like he is helping people all over the state of Washington, whether it's a large apartment or building a townhouses, 30, 40, 50 units, Thurston County, or whether it's helping someone in Chelan. He helps all the way from single family homes, somebody who's looking to build a single family home, get that permitted in Pierce County, all the way to, like I said, if large developments, plats, short plats. He helps people get permits and navigates all the way to larger commercial projects, all the way to smaller land development. And he again works, from what I understand, I'll let him speak to this, but works all over the state. And so right away, he's a phenomenal resource. And when it comes to permitting something, I will tell you, Matt, as he gets going here in just a minute, he will be a great resource for anybody who's looking like, hey, I've had a number of you reach out to me and say, hey, I need some help permitting a land. I've had some investors get a hold of me and say, hey, I hear you're an agent as well as a developer. I'm looking to build a short plat. Can you help? And Matt's going to be a part of my team, but he can be a part of your team, to add him to your team as well. So last thing I'm going to say before I introduce him, he's been working in real estate attorney for, I think, 30 years now. Mainly, he's based out of Pierce County, but works all the counties. Today, what he's going to explain this and more, but I want you to understand the big picture of today. And if everybody could just stay muted, that'd be great. The big picture for today is this. Matt's going to lay a foundation. So you might think of it this way. We've called this property development and permitting resources. Well, before you can get to permitting resources, you have to understand property development. And Matt's going to lay the foundation of how the county, the city, wherever that is in general, how they think, what laws govern the counties that we're in, Snohomish, Kane, Pierce, Mason, Lewis, the counties, how the county thinks, how the cities in general, how they think, because there's lots of unique individual issues. He's going to tackle how they think, what governs them in terms of developing real property. And then we are going to talk to you at the end about class number 2. You have to understand class number 1 before you can understand 2 or 3 about what resources are available to then develop land once you've learned how land is developed. Okay, so lastly about me, I'm a developer, flipper, also an agent. Just this last year sold 42 houses, just over $21 million in real estate, but have a heart just to equip. This originally started with me wanting to equip my immediate team and other agents. And then we said, let's throw it out there to investors and agents, as anybody we could, and just get it out there to anybody and everybody. And we've been just so blessed and surprised by the response. So we hope it's helpful to you today. So with that, Matt, we are just honored to have you. Thank you, because I know you put hours into this preparation, and today's class is free. So Matt, thank you for doing this for us, and we are honored to let you take it from here. You have 55 minutes, my friend. Please, I pass the mic to you. Matt, are you there? You want me to unmute you, or do you got it?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay.
We got you.
Very good. I too am somewhat of a novice on Zoom. I've never done anything, a presentation like this before on Zoom. I've taught classes and had seminars. Of course, I appear in court. I appear in front of the hearing examiner. I've gone to the Court of Appeals and such, but this is new tech for me, and so we're going to give it a try. I'm sure a lot of you have attended like continuing education classes. I know I have, and some of the presentations are pretty sophisticated. That is, they click on the screen and things pop up and all that. And if this concept that Mr. Sarno and I have worked on goes forward, we'll improve the delivery and spend more time on the presentation resources. But for today, it's going to be pretty much the bare bones lecture. And again, I'll apologize, I'm a lawyer, so I want to jump right in and talk about the law, but I promise I'm going to get to some more pragmatic and practical matters here in just a few minutes. But the first thing I want to talk about, of course, and I hope everybody was able to get a copy of the outline that I submitted. Okay, thumbs up there from Sarno, so that's good. So if you look, I mean, we're presenting what I call Chapter 1 today, which is basically the land use and the zoning regulations that apply. And these would be applying to land development and land redevelopment pretty much throughout the state of Washington. The same rules tend to apply, but I'm really concentrating on Thurston, Pierce, King, and Snohomish, because these are big drivers of our, big drivers of the demand these days. And as such, they're all subject to what we call the Growth Management Act. And the Growth Management Act is kind of the be all and the end all for land use regulation in the counties and the cities that are required to plan under the act. The act was adopted in the late 80s and early 90s, and it was directed towards those counties that were experiencing rapid growth. And the state legislature said these counties have got to get a handle on this growth. They've got to deal with it in the future, and they've got to prepare 20-year comprehensive plans to show comprehensively and overall in the county and the cities in the county, how are they going to deal with this rapid growth? And that, of course, was in the early 90s. Pierce County in January 1, 1995 adopted its final urban growth boundaries. And then since then, it's been history. I mean, it's been 30 years watching this evolve. And it's been a very interesting experiment if you're in that kind of thing. But probably the end all be all of it after 30 years is today's Seattle Times talking about, our prices are still going up a little bit slower, but still going up in these counties that we discussed. In Seattle, prices are up 23% year over year for single family housing. And I could probably make a fairly good argument that a lot of that is a direct result of 30 years of urban planning, but I won't do too much editorializing as we talk today. So looking at the Growth Management Act and looking at the outline, the intent of the act was essentially to prevent sprawl, to force concentrated development within urban areas, to maximize the efficiency of urban services by having a lot more people, a lot more crowded together. And anti-sprawl was, again, the thinking throughout the entire process of the adoption of Growth Management Act. And so the way that we did it in the state was to draw urban growth boundaries. And inside the urban growth boundaries are the urban growth areas where urban growth and high density is to be directed. And outside of that area is all rural, large lots, no subdivisions, no intense development at all. Basically residential on large parcels and limited commercial nodes out in the rural zone for very limited neighborhood-oriented type commercial services. No sewers, absolutely no sewers out in the rural zone. All the sewers are dedicated for the urban areas only. And of course, sewer is a big driver for density. No sewers, no density, as a rule. So we've lived with those lines pretty much intact since the beginning. In the 1995, 6, 7, Pierce County played a little bit with the urban growth lines, making adjustments that there have been map errors and things like that. But since then, those lines have been pretty much fixed, and politically, I think they're going to stay fixed. And so don't go to your land use attorney and say, I want to move the urban growth line out. Your attorney will probably say, not going to happen, just not going to happen. In the urban area, of course, everything goes. Outside, there's severe use restrictions, as I mentioned. Basically, all you're going to get out there is single-family housing on larger parcels. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I've got developers that go out, find parcels in their rural area, put down a mobile home, put down a well, put down an on-site septic, and develop it in that fashion, understanding that they're going to be onesie-twosies, pretty much going to be difficult to get any kind of real volume as you proceed. So inside, let's see. So for growth management driven counties, the 4 counties that I mentioned, there is going to be in their zoning codes and in their land use development regulations, certain key sections that you looking for development opportunities are going to want to key in on. And you'll find these sections everywhere in these various codes, because growth management requires the cities and the counties to focus on those type of regulatory considerations and constraints. So you just have to hunt around to find them, but you'll see that as you do more development in different jurisdictions, the same ones pop up again as you deal with your feasibility. And so I want to go over those. And again, I know it's law stuff, and law stuff is pretty boring, but pretty important to have as kind of a foundation of your thinking. What are these GMA counties and the cities within those counties doing? Let's see. So the number one, of course, is the zoning and the use categories within the particular zoning code or the development regulations. And those are, they have the standard, residential, commercial, industrial type sections in those zoning codes. And as you look at properties, you're immediately going to want to key in on what is the zoning, what are the allowed uses on this particular property. And each code, remember, and I'll preface everything I'm going to say is everybody's code is different. Well, Thurston County is different from Pierce County, from King County. You can't look at any one code and know, what the other jurisdictions are going to do. They've all got their own nomenclature. They've all got their own terms. You can't really even trust that one term in one county is going to mean the same term in another county. So very unfortunately, I cannot give you a template of a particular zoning regulation and say this applies throughout. They're all different, and you have to dig down into them in your particular jurisdiction in order to pull out the important stuff. And so dig down and try to find the zoning code. Well, I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Find out what the zoning designation is for your particular parcel. And then watch out, because a lot of jurisdictions will have what I call districts or overlays or special review zones or sub-area plans or stuff, which encompass perhaps this particular area that you're looking at for this particular property, and you got to key in on that. Tacoma is famous for it. They've got special review districts throughout the city that the Planning Commission has imposed, and so you might see a zone that says R1 SRD or something like that. Be real careful when you're looking at those kind of things to get down into that special district, because it too will have kind of an overlay of regulations on top of the basic zone. Also, I would implore you to look at the definitions very, very carefully for anything. If they say multifamily, go look up the definition in that zoning code for multifamily. Same with duplexes, same with, you know, any kind of subcategory of a zone. Be sure to understand fully what it means. In Pierce County, it's called MSF, moderate density single family. You have to go and look in the code to see, what does that really mean? Yeah, 4 to 6 units density, but what else does it mean? And what else does it allow? So be real careful when you're doing that. And again, I can't give you a template because they're all different up and down the coast. The next section you might look at in a particular zoning code would be under their subdivision and platting section. And the subdivision statute at the state level governs what the locals can do with regard to dividing up property, creating plats, short plats, finding site plans, divvying up the property into smaller parcels. I do that a lot when it comes to residential subdivisions, and it's all governed by both state statute and by the local code. Environmental review. In the state, we have the State Environmental Policy Act, or SEPA. SEPA is a big driver in the past for reviewing projects, especially controversial projects. It's kind of lost its sting, if you will, as time has gone on, because everybody has adopted regular environmental codes and policies. And if you pretty much follow the law in the county or the city that you're dealing with, SEPA isn't really going to jump out at you. It's only if you're trying to do a liquefied natural gas plant or grow gooey ducks in the Burley Lagoon or something like that that might draw a environmental EIS. The critical area protection and the regulations involving critical areas are crucial, unfortunately, in every development. And they are brutal, okay? That's all I'm gonna say, they are brutal. A big part of GMA was forcing local jurisdictions to adopt very stringent critical area regulations. And I'm sure you're all familiar with wetlands, steep slopes, stream corridors, habitat like gophers or eagle nests, and other aspects of the environment deemed critical areas. The general rule is you identify them on your property and you buffer them and you just stay away from them. Trying to impact them is very difficult, can be done, but the mitigation will be very severe. Dealing with critical areas is becoming more and more common because all of the properties that don't have critical areas, they've all been developed. It's the ones that are constrained and have got bad problems associated, those are the ones that are left. It took me 30 years to develop all the good stuff. Now I'm left with much, much more difficult projects. And I'm telling you, very difficult. So oftentimes people come to me and say, let's do a rezone. I don't like the zoning on this particular piece of property. Rezones are very much constrained under Growth Management Act. The local legislature cannot just shift around their zoning willy-nilly. Any rezoning done by the legislature has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, which has to be consistent with GMA. Any spot zoning done on a particular piece of property has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and consistent with the future land use map of the comprehensive plan. And if you look, got to dig down and look at the comprehensive plan and see what it says with regard to this particular area and this type of zoning. I'm over in Ellensburg right now. I have a rezone pending to make my properties highway commercial, consistent with the surrounding properties. And you go to the comprehensive plan for the city of Ellensburg, and it says future land use map commercial for my area. So my parcels are zoned residential now. I'm going to go in and get a commercial rezone, and I'm going to get it. I've had a pre-app meeting with staff. They're very supportive because we are implementing through the rezone the intent of the comprehensive plan. But if you try to do something in a rezone that contradicts the comprehensive plan, you will get shot down immediately. Non-conforming uses are a big deal because, as you can imagine, in 1995, Pierce County took big areas of the county and made them rural. And that meant 5-acre lots, 10-acre lots, minimum lot sizes. And yet out in the rural area, there were plenty of lots, and still are, that are 1 acre, 2 acres, 4 acres in size because of the past activities. Also out in the rural areas, you're going to find commercial uses that would not be allowed today. And so those kind of uses, those kind of lots, some types of buildings are deemed non-conforming. They were legal at the beginning, but they've been zoned, or the regulations have changed such that they wouldn't be permitted today. I get a lot of these calls because code enforcement goes out, somebody will rat out their neighbor, code enforcement goes out there and says, hey, you got a machine shop in your backyard. And the client says, yeah, well, it's been there for 40 years. I mean, come on. And then code enforcement says, prove it. And then guess what? They call Matt. So Matt builds a case, takes it in front of the hearing examiner, or tries to convince staff, hey, it's been there since forever. It was there lawfully before the new zoning came in that makes it non-conforming or illegal. Jurisdictions differ dramatically on how they treat non-conforming uses. Pierce County's pretty lenient. Pierce County recognizes that a lot of non-conforming uses employ people. The machine shop employs people. We don't want to drive out employment. Other jurisdictions, and especially some of the cities, are rabid about rubbing out non-conforming uses and making them go away. And they will not give you any slack with regard to expanding the non-conforming use. In some instances, they may try to eradicate it altogether. So, and the law is pretty tough on that. So beware of that, because in your development, redevelopment processes, you might run into a property just like that. Vesting of applications. Vesting is a legal doctrine that basically says in the state of Washington, if you put in an application and start down the road towards application approval, the government can't jump in immediately and change the laws to make your application infeasible or not, or just not allowed to make what you want to do not allowed. And the courts saw that back in the 70s when somebody would come in with a controversial type project, and the city council would convene a meeting and boom, put a moratorium on it and change the zoning regulations so you can't do that project in that zone. Kind of unfair, because you spend a lot of money tying up the property, gearing up, making the application and submitting it, only to get chopped out. So the doctrine has evolved over time, and I won't kill you on it, but vesting of applications only applies to plats, subdivisions, and to building permits, and to development agreements. Okay, the courts have kind of gone back the other way now. And so if you put in for like a site development application, it may not vest, and the laws might change while you're waiting. Which could surprise you. So be real careful on that, understanding the process, because as you know, some applications can take a year, and in the meantime, the council may have changed the law. As you get more and more deeper into your feasibility study and more deeper into your project, you're going to run into site development standards. And the site development standards, again, govern a variety of issues, everything from access all the way down to open space, preservation. And I'm giving you a partial list in here. And you really need to understand this, because you might be looking at this 4-acre piece of property and have some great ideas about it, but you're going to have a lot of constraints imposed on your site development. And the site development list that I give you here doesn't even include the architectural stuff if you want to go and build your multifamily building. Nothing here is really oriented toward the building itself. This is strictly site issues. And so site issues, you got landscape plans, you got setbacks, you've got height limitations, you've got lots of different standards that you have to adhere to that are going to affect the project and affect potentially the viability of the project. Stormwater control, I can't say enough about stormwater. It is probably the most difficult and yet critical problem facing all substantial land development. If you go and pave over 10,000 square feet, you are immediately triggering a variety of land use regulations and stormwater regulations and stormwater implications. And stormwater now has gone from both quality of dealing with the quality of the runoff as well as dealing with the quantity of the runoff. It's just not enough to hold the water back. You have to filtrate the water from pollution, pollution generating surfaces like your driveways, like your roadways. And so this, it can just gobble up huge amounts of your property for a big stormwater pond and a biofiltration swale and stuff like that. And I can't emphasize that enough, because it's hugely costly, both in loss of land and also in just pure cost to deal with that. Utilities, the only two utilities I really care about early on in feasibility is water and sewer. If I'm in on a, how far away is the sewer line to drive my density, and is there a water purveyor in the area that is going to be able to serve my project? And find the water purveyor, make a request to them for a water availability letter, and they'll send you out a letter telling you if they have the capacity to serve. We'll talk in a minute about going online and finding the sewer lines and where they are in relation to your project. But sewer and water, you got to check those out. You got to check them out pretty early in the process. Many jurisdictions are offering customer service meetings or pre-application meetings now. And I've used them extensively whenever I can, whenever I have an application and the jurisdiction allows it. Sometimes they require it. You go in for a pre-app meeting. Most of them are held by Zoom now. And you present your project, rough outline of your project to staff. And you bring in a bunch of staff people and they poke holes in it right there, which is really helpful before you make the application, because then you can deal with the issues that are raised by staff and things that you might have missed in your analysis. Got to be careful with pre-application meetings, because we're all human, and a staff person might tell you something that later on turns out to be untrue or inaccurate, or and I've had it, or they get reversed by their superiors. They tell you, oh yeah, you can do this, or no, this is how we would work at the pre-app meeting, going for your application goes in under review, and suddenly the story changes. Okay. I've had it, and it's just, it gets you right here in the guts. You thought you could rely, and then maybe you can't. So when you do, if you want to do a pre-application meeting, and I would urge you to be ready, be prepared, have a good detailed site plan, go in and ask the hard questions. Do not slough off on the hard issues. You bring those issues out up front, and you get staff to deal with them, and you get the hard answers. And don't count on your consultants to do that for you, because they want the project to go forward. They want to get their fees. No, if it's going to die, kill it now at the pre-app meeting. Don't kill it after you spend $10,000 on preparing an application to submit and then have it die. Find out up front. And I tell you, I sat down Zoom with City of Tacoma, and the issue was, are we going to be able to front load these houses that we're going to build, or are we going to be forced to rear load them in the alley? And the code said rear loading is preferred. In fact, you really got to rear load them. But we asked, will you allow us to front load? Because, and I told them, this project will not go forward if we have to build that alley and do the frontage improvements. We can do one or the other, but we can't do both. And I pinned them down. I mean, don't change your mind, I said, because you'll have the swing coming right over the table at you if you let, after we make application, that you tell us, gotta go alley load. Okay, so really, really use it, but just be careful and use it right. There's a variety of land use decision makers out there, starting with staff, administrative staff. They can make a lot of decisions and have a lot of power to make decisions on your application as it moves forward, as they should. If you've done everything right, if your application complies with the code, staff can approve it and move it forward. Some types of permits require heightened scrutiny. Your subdivision for your preliminary plat, you're going to have to go before a decision maker. These days, most of the decision making is done by hearing examiners. I appeared in front of hearing examiners for years and years and years, so many times, and they make the determination. Staff comes in with a recommendation, the applicant comes in with their presentation, the neighbors come in with their opposition, and then the hearing examiner makes a decision. In some jurisdictions, the hearing examiner's decision is advisory and it will go on to the city council or to the county commissioners. But most often the legislative bodies like the councils, they step back. They don't want to be part of day-to-day land use decisions. They leave it to the hearing examiner. It's a quasi-judicial process. I appear again routinely in front of a variety of hearing examiners in a variety of jurisdictions. There's also community planning commissions, there's community groups, there's neighborhood groups that sometimes you have to go through on a night meeting before you can go to the hearing examiner. And in like City of Olympia, mandatory neighborhood meetings where you have a meeting at 7 o'clock at night at the city hall, and everybody comes in and throws stuff at the land use attorney or whoever's presenting on it. And sometimes on real good ones, they bring in pitchforks and they pitch the land use attorney back and forth amongst themselves. You live through that, and then you can go to see the hearing examiner. There are a variety of relief mechanisms available, variances, deviations, reasonable use exceptions. I try to avoid those because that gives staff a whole lot of discretion to mitigate or force mitigation on you or to condition your project, because you're asking them for a favor and they're going to get something back from you. So, but they are there. Sometimes you're in just a position where, you just can't quite make the regulation. You need a variance or you need a deviation. Go talk to staff about it. Sometimes they can approve them administratively. Sometimes you just add it onto your project approval and take it to the hearing examiner for a final decision. So that's, I really wanted to go through that, and I'm sorry if I bored you to death, but those are key elements that you're going to find as you search through zoning codes for answers to your questions on your development. And I wanted to highlight those because I think they'll become a little more apparent here as we go into the what I call research resources. The world has changed a lot. Online stuff is really, really available out there. All the sophisticated jurisdictions, the counties and the larger cities have very, very robust and sophisticated permitting resources and permitting portals that you can go to find the answers that you need. In the old days, you'd have to go down and talk to a staff person over the counter. Nowadays, you just go online and point and click. And Sarno was saying that, oh, people are inhibited about this. But once you've done it and once you've worked your way through it, it's really, really slick. Okay, and it's made my life so much easier. I can sit at home in my jammies and be a permit guy because all of it's there and it's readily available. And so it really depends. And again, I can't show you. Oh, this is how they look, because they're all different. Every jurisdiction has their own different setup, and all you can do is go to the jurisdiction that you're interested in and play with their system. Just go through and work your way through the system. And so this morning, I go online and I just type in on Google, I say Thurston County permitting. Okay, and I type in that, and then boom, up it comes. And here's the Thurston County webpage, permitting department. And it says permitting right across the top. And then it says right here, research a property, right on the screen, research a property. And then it has all of these places where you can point and click. And one of them is zoning map. Aha, I'm getting closer, zoning map. And then there's all these different links as well. And then the zoning map comes up when you point and click on it. And then right here it says open info page, and you point and click on that after you've put in your street address or your parcel number that you're interested in. And then zoom up from the Geodata Center for Thurston County. You have data for parcel number 1181. And it gives you a whole long list of things that are important about that particular parcel, including right here, your zoning. What do we got? R4 to the 8, whatever that means. Well, then you got to go and click back into the zoning code and find out what does R4 to 8 mean? What can you do there? What are the requirements? Okay, but I can't, I can't sit here and go through everybody's different portal and how it all works. You have to go and work it yourself on a particular parcel and just work it and work it and work it. And you can find all the stuff that you need. You can find the zoning, you can find critical areas if they're available, you can find the utilities. It's all there in the sophisticated jurisdictions, as long as you can work your way through it. And not to be afraid of it. It is just a hugely valuable resource that you can utilize. Go, and the first thing, of course, is have your 10-digit tax parcel number. Armed with that 10-digit tax parcel number, and have it on copied, and just point and click it into all these different boxes as to searching for what you're looking for. The sewer maps, the zoning maps. Just click on that 10-digit number. Where it tells you to put in, address or parcel number, put it in there and go for it. It's really, really slick. Okay. And I'm not going to go through in detail how I do feasibility. That's either going to be chapter 2 or chapter 3 of our presentation. I'm not sure where we're at here. 40 minutes in, is that where we're at? So I'm not going to go into that kind of detail here, but I think what I might do is put together a couple of examples in different jurisdictions, and I think that we can make Zoom work. So I can click on the screen, so the Thurston County screen comes down. I can click on where to take you to find the various information. If you're in Pierce County or interested in Pierce County, definitely go to the PPW website and scroll down, and it's all there. On-site mapping, codes used by Planning and Public Works, PPW, forms, application forms, and then all these jurisdictions have application portals. When you're ready to apply, you just click onto the portal and work through the application, and then you point and you just click your PDFs for your site plan and your traffic study and your title report. You just add those PDFs into your application materials. In the old days, you'd have rolls of plans and stacks of documents, and you'd go down and hand them over the counter. Virtually every sophisticated jurisdiction is zero paper. They will not take paper. It all has to be done through their portal where you make application, and then they take it in. Pierce County will take it in. They'll deem it complete. They'll deem it worthy, and then they'll give you a payment portal. Run in your credit card, spend $14,000 on your credit card for lots of mileage points, and zoom, your application is now complete. It's been paid for, and it's in the process. And then Pierce County and some of the jurisdictions are very robust in that you can follow exactly everybody, the reviewers, which department's reviewing, what are they saying about it? They will send you comments all electronically. And so you can be sitting at home with your slippers on, and you can get something from the fire marshal saying, I need this. And then you find your consultant to satisfy that demand. It just goes back and forth, back and forth. Way, way better than the old days, where it used to be paper memos and letters and that kind of stuff. So probably all we've done is allowed them to be greater regulators, that is, impose more regulations by making it so easy. But it is really, really very slick. And the only way, I can't teach you how to do it. The only way to do it is to go and do it and mess with their systems and play with their systems until you understand how they work. And I gave you some resources about the county. There's also on my bookmarks, I have the Pierce County Planning Department bookmarked. I also have the county auditor. I have the county assessor. I'll have the county health department. All of these are there. All I have to do is click on them, and it takes me right to their portal or to their information center, and there I can do my work. And I have those there, and they're just invaluable resources to be able to go and look at the assessor's office, find out who the taxpayer is, find out what the legal description is, go to the auditor's office and point and click and find out what kind of deeds of trust are against the property, who owns the property, what's the vesting documents. All that stuff is just so much easier now. Secretary of State has a very robust corporations page. And so if you want to form your own LLC, you can just point and click, form your own LLC. More importantly, if you want to look up an LLC or a corporation that you see as the taxpayer record on a parcel, find out who these people are, go to the Secretary of State. All of their filings are there, including who they are and what their addresses are. So really, really good stuff. There's an outfit called Municipal Research and Services Center, which caters to the regulators, to the planners. But you click on that, and it can direct you to some really good resources. Google Earth. Don't ask me how that works. Department of Ecology has a really good one on hazardous waste stuff, and also landfill sites. So there's immense amounts of resources. I'm sure you people are way more sophisticated in finding that kind of stuff. I didn't even list like Zillow or Redfin or any of those folks. So having done that and bored you to death, I want to talk about a little bit about reoccurring issues that I see in my development processes and what I see again and again and again, and just give you a highlight of them so that when you see them coming, your antenna can quiver a little bit, and maybe you can head them off early on. So under recurring issues, I've got boundary line encroachments and boundary line disputes. What's one of the first things you do when you're going to develop a piece of property? You go and get a survey. And sure enough, the survey shows we got a problem. Somebody's fence line is over the line. Somebody's shed is in, right in the middle of, where our buffer is supposed to be or whatever. We got a problem. And so you got to wrestle with that problem, and you got to wrestle with that pretty early on, because until you know what exactly your boundaries of your property are, usable boundaries, it's going to be pretty hard to put together what you want to do and how you want to do it. So you all remember from your real estate law class, everybody gives statutory warranty deeds for property. Statutory warranty deed has warranties, imbued right into it, right? And what are the warranties? Quiet title, exclusive possession. So if your neighbor has a shed across the line, you might go back to the person that sold you the property under the statutory warranty deed and say, you got to defend title. That's part of the warranty. And so, and you'll see that pretty fairly common. Somebody will buy a piece of property, discover there's a flaw on it, and then immediately want to turn to the seller to say, hey, you got to fix this. Perfectly legitimate. I see it all the time. Trees over the line, just a pain. I mean, trees right on the line. The law is very unclear and not very helpful at all. About the only thing you do is take an apple pie with a check under it and go over to the neighbor and say, I'm taking the tree down. Because if they object, you've got a real problem. Some of the solutions are boundary line adjustments. You can just go through and adjust the boundary. There's the state statute allows for boundary line resolutions where two neighbors can get together and fix their boundary with a surveyor and a document. Sometimes I use like exclusive use easements, but those are kind of messy. And then of course, in the end, there's litigation. If that title is in doubt, or if there's encroachments or whatever, you got to do what you got to do. But try to settle. Definitely try to sell. Another one is tax parcel segregation. And this is kind of an interesting one. And I want to say that just because there's a tax parcel number assigned to a piece of property, it does not make it a legal lot of record. Okay. The assessor treasurer is not going to determine whether or not it's a legal lot of record when somebody comes in and says, I want to seg my property. And a typical example is you've got a 5-acre parcel and over in the corner is the house. And then you got a barn and you got a bunch of pasture. So you can go in and segregate the property so that the house is on 1 acre and then the other 4 acres are raw land. Then maybe you can take that raw land and put it into like a timber tax credit or egg credit or something like that and get 2 different tax rates, one on the 1 acre parcel with a house and the other as egg land or something. Then you've got 2 tax parcel numbers. So then the person goes to sell, the realtor comes in and says, aha, I got 2 parcels. I got a house over here and I'll fix up and then I'll have 4 acres and I'll subdivide that and I'll make $1 million. Uh-oh, it's not a legal lot of record. It's not, it's not its own separate parcel. It was segregated only for tax purposes. Watch out for that. I see it again and again. And you can look on the assessor treasurer's website under the legal description in Pierce County for recent ones that are pretty good about saying at the bottom of the legal description, segregated for tax purposes only. And that'll trigger you to realize this is 1 lot, not 2. Access problems are just legendary, okay? I mean, I deal with so many easement issues, it's legendary. 2 types of problems. You're going to have legal access problems and you're going to have physical access problems, okay? The legal access problems is you're landlocked. Your property nowhere touches a right-of-way or a public way or a public escape route for your property. You're either dependent on a easement or you're dependent on a private road perhaps, or there just isn't, or maybe it's unopened right-of-way and it's just not there. So legal access, you've got to check that out. That's be sure that you've got a way in and out of your property and be sure that it's sufficient. Physical access is all well and good. You might have a nice 30-foot wide easement between your property and the highway. Problem is the easement area goes right through the middle of the wetland. So physical access or over the cliff. Physical access, is also a part and parcel with making sure you can get in and out of the property. Water availability, I touched on this. Water is a big component. Pierce County, everybody has water service areas, and you have this potpourri of public water systems like Tacoma Water. You've got these mutual systems. You've got these group Bs out there that are basically little neighborhood systems. You've got individual wells with maybe 1 or 2 people on it. And you've got these different types of, water services. Figure out what you got, figure out who's your service provider, get onto them early on in the process, and make sure that they can serve. Another one is the effects of what I call the pre-subdivision statute platting. I have a little example here, but you see lots and blocks, right? Everybody's seen lots and blocks plats where it's the Miller's third edition to the city of Tacoma, and it's out there in Spanaway somewhere, and it's this map, and it's got all of these streets going this way, and it's got all these alleys going this way, and there's all these lots. They're 25 foot wide, they're 120 feet deep, and you might and so you might have a single tax parcel number that might encompass 6 or 7 or 5 of these. Okay, so the parcel is 25, 25 footers, 125 feet this way and 120 feet deep. That's the parcel, and yet underlying it is these 5 underlying parcels from the old plat, the Meeker's third edition to Tacoma. Cities and counties will recognize those as individual lots. Okay, cities and counties will recognize those as individual lots, even though there's only one tax parcel number. You've actually got 5 parcels. And so if you had 5 in a row like that, say city of Tacoma, say you had a 50-foot minimum frontage requirement, you could have 2 of them together at 50 feet, there's 1 lot. You could have 3 of them together at 75 feet, there's another lot, without having to short plat, without having to go through the subdivision process. Really valuable stuff, especially if you find one with 5 or 6 or 7 of these, and the house is on 2 or 3 of them, 4 of them, and there's 3 hanging on the other side. That's a legal lot, in addition to the house. No subdivision required. You just go down to the assessor treasurer's office and you have them seg that out and create a separate tax parcel number for it, and then you go in for your building permit. Pretty slick. Watch out for those, because I think they're a tremendously valuable opportunity. And I'll bet one of the people that are watching today saying, "Eek, I just gave away her secret," because she did it very successfully down in South Tacoma. Hazardous waste is always a problem. I'm sure in your classes you've been taught about that. Generally in a residential context, it'll be the old oil burner tank underneath the house that's been leaking for years. There is DOE compliance, voluntary compliance programs that you can go to. DOE, I'm sorry, Department of Ecology. They're very helpful. It's all pretty straightforward. You can ultimately get an NFA letter, no further action required, from the Department of Ecology. We did this a lot for gas stations in the day, and you still every once in a while see one. You might see a property that has been subject to remediation. Make sure that that NFA letter is on file so that you won't be scaring away any lenders or potential buyers. Poorly draining soils. This goes right back to the stormwater issue that we talked about at the beginning. I mean, I've got civil engineers that say, before you start your feasibility, go out with a tractor and dig and dig and dig and dig and see what the soils are. And there's lots of different types of soils because the glaciers came down 10,000 years ago and then they receded back. And some places they dumped, like in Spanaway, these big, huge, tons and tons of this, rocks this big. And so it drains right through to the aquifer, no problem. Over on Canyon Road, you've got stuff that's as hard as your tabletop, glacial till, absolutely no infiltration. And yet stormwater regulations demand at the first cut, you have to infiltrate your stormwater. And you just are not allowed to let it run off onto your neighbor's property, which it will on that tabletop stuff, off of Canyon Road. So soils, poorly draining soils, it's a big issue, and certainly step 2 of your feasibility, or certainly step 3 of your feasibility, is going out there and making sure of what you've got. Because You have to deal with your stormwater. You have to try to infiltrate it. If you can't infiltrate it, or if it's going to be slow infiltration, then your stormwater structure gets bigger and bigger and bigger until pretty soon you've got, you know, a huge pond taking up a whole bunch of building lots that you thought you were going to develop. If anybody's interested, down at 176 between Canyon and Meridian, closer to the Canyon side, there's a giant double pond down there on the south side of 176. I built that because of all those houses I built all the way around there for those subdivisions. I mean, the poorly draining, we had to hold back all of that water. Those were 2002 stormwater regulations, which are easy compared to today's stormwater regulations, which are brutal. Foresters practices, you may run into this. As you know, if you go out and whack your property and take all the trees off of it, the counties will impose a moratorium on development unless you've gotten a Class 4 conversion permit through the county, allowing you to take those trees down as part of a development that you're going to do. So if you go out there and you see, you know, it's all been recently logged, go and check the status of the conversion permit or the status of the moratorium, because it may be you're unable to develop that property for 5 years. And it kind of goes to the whole tree issue. Trees, I tell my clients, trees are not your friends. If you've got a heavily forested parcel in Pierce County, you're going to have to do a tree inventory. That is, the surveyor is going to have to measure every tree and decide what kind it is throughout the entire parcel. And then you're going to have to do tree preservation and tree replacement when you take those trees down. And if you got oak trees in Pierce County, lots of luck. Okay, good luck. Really, really tough regulations. Okay, so that's about 54 minutes of my blather. And I'm just going to close it before we try questions and answers. I don't know how well it's going to work to try to do questions and answers, but this was a presentation put together by Matt Sweeney and Mr. Sarno on the back of a napkin at a pizza joint a few weeks ago. We had no idea. He was talking about 10 or 15 of his buddies, you know, being online, and me, you know, yakking it up with them and stuff. And somehow it's mushroomed into this demand that's way beyond my, you know, expectations. And I just had no idea that we were going to have this kind of interest. I don't know if what I've done today is of interest, or if there's things that you'd rather I do that would be, you know, of interest. But I'm more than happy to try to, you know, throw this stuff out because I enjoy it. This was chapter 1. Down at the bottom of your outline, I've got chapters 2 through 6. So there's lots of things we could talk about, but I really don't want to talk about anything unless you folks are interested in it. And I really, you know, can't tell unless you give us feedback. And so we're going to pretend like this is a little startup company. We've thrown this out into the marketplace to see if there's any traction, and we'd certainly like to get your feedback from it. And with that, I think I'm going to end and we're going to try a question and answer thing, but I'm not going to guarantee its results.
Well, Matt, first of all, we want to tell you, as I'm seeing people post in there, fantastic, so grateful, you know, people just giving me notes like, thanks for doing this. Great information, very helpful. I know that I think it's helpful for people that are both investors, you know, that are saying, hey, I know there's from the Washington real estate investment side, the page there's people that have contacted me saying, I'm curious about how to do, you know, I want to build 2 or 3 homes and look to sell them. Others have contacted about, hey, could I build a duplex, you know, multifamily, triplex, fourplex. You know, the idea of, you know, the real estate market is so hot, and so, you know, it continues to be. I mean, you know, that developing land, it becomes such a, you know, a desirous thing because, you know, in some cases, if you can build for, you know, in my case, if I can build something at $150 a square foot and even have, those are my buddy hookups and stuff, but then sell for $250. But people that want to build duplexes, that want to build, single family homes or short plats, learning about building under 9 houses and how that can help. So first of all, just thank you so much, Matt. This is a real treasure to that you would be so generous to give of your time. And I know you and I talked, and I know you put a lot of study into this. So I'm going to start taking some questions, and we're going to fire off some questions to you. But before I do that, let me just kind of sum up what I heard you say, and you can tell me if I got it right. And that is basically the land and zoning, the Growth Management Act was placed on all of these cities and counties. The GMA was put on top, or they instituted the GMA, and the Growth Management Act then governs what all of these counties and cities do and how they treat us when we want to now develop something. Is that about right?
Very much so. And anecdotally, this all occurred in the 1980s. And what had happened is Pierce County was deemed the poster child for how not to develop and the evils of sprawl. Pierce County, was just this, look, they've got general use zoning in most of their county where anything goes, okay? And so the county executive and the county council got together and they adopted a pre-GMA comprehensive plan that would try to rein in some of this and try to do, GMA things at the local level, not, again, before the state got involved. And they passed this comprehensive plan. And then there was this huge backlash from the citizens of Pierce County who ran a referendum and repealed the comprehensive plan, to the horror of all the people that wanted to do planning and manage growth. Okay, and the county executive never forgave the county for doing that. And then he went on to become governor. And then as governor, he got GMA through, which crushed Pierce County's autonomy. That governor, of course, was Booth Gardner, former Pierce County executive, then state governor, who brought GMA upon us.
Okay, so that's really helpful. So this GMA governs all the counties, all the cities, and that's that now imposed on us for any of us that are saying, hey, I saw this lot. Whether they reach out to you and say, Matt, can you help me do feasibility? They reach out to me or Rick Wilkerson or whatever, or the ideal is that we're going to train everybody. Maybe our next class, like we talked about, maybe in 4 to 6 weeks, give you some time and get, kind of get ready for it, but to train everybody so then they can go into the GIS themselves. And maybe what we'll talk about is then, giving you a case study. I've got one in Pierce County right now, a client that's like, hey, Billy, I want to sell my house, but the back half is, I got a half an acre. Could we subdivide it and build a house back there? They're on septic, so taking some cases like that and say, okay, Matt, here's a case. Can you now on Zoom take us into the GIS and show us what you would look for? What would you look for in terms of, is sewer close by? Okay, no, we're going to need a septic system. What about water? Where's the water coming from? Is there wetland? Would that impede it or whatever? We'll talk more about that, but I can go on and on because I'm so glad you're here. I have 1,000 questions for you, but I get to ask that. Let me throw you question number 1 from Jenny Moore. Typically, does a short plat need to go through the hearing process, or is the hearing process reserved for larger development projects? By the way, I'm in Kitsap County. So again, does a short plat need to go through a hearing process, or is the hearing process reserved for larger development projects?
As a general rule, short plats are done administratively by staff. And does not go in front of the hearing examiner. I believe that comes from state code, which is then implemented by the cities. So the short answer is no, short plats are done administratively. You don't go to the hearing examiner. Formal plats, either more than 4 or more than 9, depending on the jurisdiction, has to go in front of the hearing examiner or the legislative body.
Okay, so if you get over 4, if you want to develop a lot, 5 acres or 10 acres, and the wetland isn't impeding it or whatever, if you want to go more than 4, then it's going to have to go before a hearing examiner. Is that right?
Some jurisdictions have, and the state again allows this. Some jurisdictions have said short plats can go up to 9. So in Pierce County, you can have a 9-lot short plat in the urban zone. Out in the rural, it can only be 4 lots. So in the urban zone, you can go to 9. If you hit 10, it's a formal plat. You got to go see the hearing examiner.
Perfect. Okay. And the hearing examiner, just a quick note from my own experience, I just had to go through a variance process to build one of the houses I'm building on the lake into the wetland buffer. But the lot was so small that there was no way to not do it in the wetland buffer. And would you say, Matt, my experience, at least in Pierce County, was the hearing examiner is a 6-month waiting process. Is there any rules on how long it can take to get to a hearing examiner, or would you say it just totally depends?
It totally depends on the complexity of the project, the diligence of staff, and the diligence of the applicant and the applicant's consultant. If you call up a typical wetland biologist in Pierce County right now and say, hey, run on out there and take a look at my property, he might say, well, I can get out there in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Or she might, say, well, I'll sit. No, actually, she'll say, well, Matt, since it's for you, I'll make it 3 weeks.
Contact you, Matt. Matt, I agree. I would say your contacts. I would also recommend, I mean, you and I can throw out names. I think Eric Russell did mine. He's a biologist in Pierce County. He was great. Did my wetland study, helped me with that. Eric Russell is great. Highly recommend him. You probably have some as well, but that's helpful to know that, it varies in time depending on the complexity of the project. All right, you ready for question number 2 or next question? While working on a subplat, if part of a private road needs to be converted to a public road, do all property owners have to agree? Can an attorney help with this? So again, they're working on a subplat. If part of the private roads needs to be converted to a public road, do all property owners have to agree?
Off the cuff, the legal advice is dangerous. Should I give the, I'll give the disclaimer. Nothing I say here today can be used against me ever again. I think as a general rule, converting a private road into a public road is going to require approval of all the adjoining and users for that private road. Sometimes you might look on a plat or a plat map, an old plat map, and it'll say this road to be converted to public roads upon the construction to public road standards or something like that. So there might be a note on the face of the old plat where the private road was created that might have an out for that. That would be something I'd look for right away. To see if it's there. And then I'd also probably talk to the county people that are asking me, you got to make it public. I'd talk to the county people and say, how do I do that? And then he asked the traffic engineer at the county, I mean, are you guys going to condemn it for me so that I can get it? Or am I going to have to go hat in hand and try to buy these people off? So I'd look at first the requirement. Why am I having to do it? And then I'd look on the old plat and see if there was a provision for conversion from public to private.
Okay.
And that's a tough one, though.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next up, somebody had asked me privately, how do I get a hold of a septic designer? If anybody's looking for a good septic designer, Matt's an excellent connection to get you connected. And both Matt and I recommend Rick. Rick is just, he's swamped with work, so he usually turns away quite a bit of, he'll forward you on, but he'll take some of it. But Rick Wilkerson is excellent, very respected in Pierce County.
Also, the health departments will have lists of approved septic installers and lists of approved septic designers. So go to the local health department and look up and see if they've got a list posted that you could look at.
Okay. Next up, wondering if you could go over the people involved in a development, from wetland engineers to architects. Who are the people involved in developing raw land? That's a great question. Who are the people involved? I know it's a big answer, but what would you say, maybe, what would your thoughts be on developing from raw land to, we're getting ready to break ground? Who would you say are the people involved in that?
I had a list of about 12 different types of consultants that I cut off the bottom of the outline and said, I'm going to save this list for when I do chapter 3,
I like
real estate chapter 3. Let's see, understanding feasibility studies. Okay, that would be a very appropriate place where I would put that list. But at a minimum, for pretty much all projects, you're going to need the surveyor. If you're making impervious surface, you're going to need a civil engineer. This is big. This would be something more than just adding on to your garage. Okay, this would be a project. Okay, surveyor, civil engineer, critical area person, wetland biologist, or whoever, depending on the nature of your critical areas. Those would be the absolute three that, and if you're on septic, you would want a septic designer there. And so when I go to pre-application meetings, very often I will take these people with me via Zoom so they can listen to the bureaucrats answering my questions and chime in themselves. But those would be the four that, right out of the chute. If you got tree issues, you might need an arborist. For your final development, you might need a landscape architect. If you got a steep slope, you might need a geologist. If you got soil infiltration issues, somebody's going to have to, maybe your on-site guy can deal with it, but your civil engineer might analyze the soil, but you might need a geologist to analyze the soil for infiltration purposes. Okay, don't forget your archaeologist. Down in Thurston County, I want to do 34 townhomes on a site, 5-acre site, and the tribes wrote in and said, watch out for arrowheads and burial grounds and stuff like that. And I'm having to hire an archaeologist to go and survey the site and see if there's any evidence of that kind of stuff on the property. $6,700.
Yeah.
It's just like traffic engineer. Oftentimes traffic engineers are getting involved in this kind of stuff. Generally, I don't deal with architects or anything on the building side until way down the pike on the project. But those would be 6 or 8 types of people that you're going to need in one form or another.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Matt. I know you and I talked about this the other day and got a laugh out of it. But when I was talking with Rick, Rick and I play racquetball together, and he was saying, Billy, I'm going to break it down for you when he was originally teaching me, and I'm just going to pass this along. I know Matt might say it's a little more complicated as he's so well taught, but Rick broke it down into 2 things. He said, listen, you're trying to build something, a house, short plat. I mean, this gets more complicated the more you want to build. But at the end of the day, he said, what the county cares about is 2 things. As long as you figured out the zoning, the 2 things the county cares about is soils. Of course, there's the septic designer pulling out soils, right? So he says the soils and critical areas. That's what they care about, soils and critical areas. But again, there's a lot more to it. I know that we talked about there's a lot more to it in terms of traffic impact, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, soils can, then the critical areas that you pointed out so well, all of those, the wetlands, the gophers, the shoreline, we had to do a shoreline review, all those critical areas, the wetlands, eagle's nest, oak trees, blah, blah, blah. And that goes on.
And he's right, because stormwater control and critical areas can gobble up so much of the land. And you've walked the property, you think you got 5 acres. By the time you've dealt with the critical areas and dealt with the stormwater, maybe you're down to 2 acres or 3 acres. And if you're trying to pencil a feasibility on lot yield or whatever, there's a big difference between 5 and 3.
So there you go. That's it for everybody here, guys and gals. If you want to break it down even to a more simple, again, keep in mind that you want to, have some disclaimers there, but if you want to break it down into simple language, if you're an agent or if you're a developer, the county cares about soils and critical areas. Of course, they care about all these other things, but you need to know, where am I going to put my septic? Where's that going to go? And the soils, unless there's sewer in the street, and the critical areas are so big to, are you going to have wetlands? What about geo? Is there a slope? Those are all part of critical areas. Okay, let me see if I can give you another one here. Wondering if you got people involved. Okay, here, next question is, one more time, please help how to identify segregate lots. how do you identify segregated lots? And that question might have been applicable. If I'm not sure if you can still answer that.
When I generally see it, it's a single owner owning more than one contiguous lot, right? And so the single owner is selling two parcels, or 3 parcels, or whatever. And the question arises, how were those parcels created? Were they legally created, or were they segregated for tax purposes only, or were they illegally created? And I had one in Kitsap County. Okay, so a little history. The state of Washington adopted the subdivision code in the 1970s. Before the subdivision code, as you remember from your real estate classes, people would sell property by just creating a legal description and sell a piece of their property by creating a legal description and a deed and say, here you go. And so 10 acres, the east 5 acres of the following 10 acres, I hereby convey to Billy Sarno. Okay. Prior to the subdivision statute, no problem, happened all the time. It's deeding by legal description. Okay. But after the subdivision statute, that was prohibited. You could not do that any longer legally. You had to go through the subdivision process of your local jurisdiction. And so I found one in Kitsap County, right after the adoption of the subdivision code and Kitsap County's adoption of their subdivision code in the 70s. Sure enough, the guy sold half of his property by deed with just a legal description. And so it was an illegal lot of record. And so later on, when somebody came in to try to get a building permit, Kitsap County said, illegal lot, no building allowed.
Wow.
So when you see adjoining parcels that were under common ownership and now they've gone their separate ways, you might have to research back up the chain of title and find out what was it when it was together and when did it make it split. And that's how you tell a legal lot of record created legally versus one that may be in violation of the subdivision statute.
Okay, and certainly if a person goes to title and escrow and the title and escrow and asks, or does some research with them, it seems like that would bring up,
on a first blush, title report might miss it. They may not have gone back and done the research. If you ask them to, they will. But on first blush, they may just assume, hey, it's been a tax parcel number for 20 years. What could go wrong?
I see. Okay, something you mentioned, I think there are some developers that may have this interest. I do for sure, as somebody who develops, builds, all that. You mentioned that honoring those old lots, that sounds like a little bit of a gem. I mean, I'm sure somebody's already looked for those, but honoring those old lots, legal lots, and it's if I understand right, you're saying it shows 5 possible. Now, does that mean where that red arrow is, does that mean those are 5 buildable lots right there?
No, I didn't say buildable. I said recognizable. Okay. Because remember, in this zone in the city of Tacoma, you had a 50-foot minimum lot requirement, 50-foot wide minimum lot frontage requirement. So 2 of these at 25 feet each worked like a charm. Okay, but one of them would not. However, in other parts of the city of Tacoma, they'll recognize 25-foot lots and they'll have 0 lot line development allowed. And so I've seen they take 5 of these lots and they put 5 townhomes, attached townhomes, and then they can sell them all individually without having to condominiumize. Remember, condominium law in the state of Washington is death, right? Don't ever condominiumize your project in the state of Washington if it's a new project. And if you need to know the answer to that, you'll talk to an attorney, okay? The condominium law in the state of Washington is death. And so the state legislature has pretty much wrote it out. But when you can take 5 townhomes like that and put them on 5 legal lots of record in the city of Tacoma, that's golden. Okay, and this kind of stuff is all over. You'll find it in South King County. You'll find it in Pierce County. These kind of old parcels. And so, anecdotally, the first one of these, the first plat ever recorded in the state of Washington, was in the town of Steilacoom. Yeah, factoid. Okay, save that one for dinner tonight, and you can stump your audience. But and again, before the subdivision statute, this is how they did it. And they would record these things, and the cities and the counties would recognize them as legitimate.
Okay, so for those of us who are interested in making money on building something, build like in that case where that person was able to do 5 townhouses, how is that going to be maybe for our next class? How would a person go in and find where those places are? How would an investor say, hey, I want to find out where those those legal lots, those old lots are maybe available like that, and then I could reach out, we can get a hold of the owner by title and escrow or whatever, and see if they'd be willing to sell and see if we could build on those.
I think this these type of maps are part of the county's system, and you can access these type of maps through the county, not through the city, but through the county. Okay. So that's where you find this kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you. I might talk to you more about that. That'd be interesting. Okay, we got a few more to go here and then we'll wrap it up. Have you seen critical area square footage be transferred like for like to another area or another lot and had this approved? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Some jurisdictions have tried to do what they call critical area banking, where they find a critical area like a beat up old wetland somewhere, and they fix it all up so that it becomes a really good wetland, and maybe they create additional wetlands around it in this big area, and then they try to create a wetland bank. So if somebody's in a bind and they need to rub out a piece of wetland over here, they can buy or add to the bank, financially over here. I have not seen one of those successfully utilized or put together because of the difficulty in trying to get a simultaneous type transfer. However, the county road department, and I think WSDOT, does that kind of banking for themselves, because WSDOT, I mean, when they got to put the road through, it doesn't matter how wet it is, they're going to go right on through. They're going to rub out wetlands all day long, but they will bank them or replicate them over here. For a private person, if you're forced to rub out a wetland, I think the first thing they'll try to make you do is replicate that wetland on your parcel. And oftentimes they'll try to make you replicate the amount that you've rubbed out, 5,000 square feet times 2, something like that. So you've got to build 10,000 square feet of wetland for the 5,000 that you rubbed out. That means, carving it out, making hydrology, putting plants all around it, putting a fence around it, and basically creating a wet pond or wet area. That'd be a form of mitigation for your unavoidable impacts to a wetland. But that's in extremis. I mean, that's the last step, last possible scenario. They're not going to entertain it just because you want to. They're only going to entertain it because you have to. That is, your road has to go here.
I see.
And so, I mean, because you can never really truly replicate them to the same quality, habitat value by artificial means. They want to preserve the ones that are there naturally.
Okay,
so very difficult, very not impossible, but very difficult. And you'd want to talk to your wetland biologist at length.
That's helpful. So really difficult to do unless you're WSDOT.
Yeah, WSDOT, they go for it.
They just blast right through it. Okay. What is the best way to figure out what part of a parcel has buildable land when that area has gullies and wetlands? This sounds like maybe chapter 3. It's a great question, but it sounds like a chapter 3 answer.
You have to find the high and dry part and say goodbye to the rest. The high, dry, and flat part.
There you go. Look for high, dry, and flat. That's great. A lot of people saying thank you, Matt. This has been very helpful. Thank you. We've got about 8 minutes left. Probably need a vocabulary sheet for terms new to some of us. Eminent domain, highest and best use, land entitlements, pathway of growth, any good resources for stormwater design. So I think the question, so basically they were saying, hey, probably need a vocabulary sheet. Good point, Dean. There's probably, there's some tribal language here if you're involved in this that gets harder to understand, but Matt did a good job of explaining. So any good resources for stormwater design?
Every jurisdiction will have their own design standards. Pierce County has a manual for stormwater standards. You can find it in it's part of the Pierce County document section. Also, the state of Washington, I believe, Department of Ecology has a model stormwater ordinance or stormwater regulation that pretty much all the cities and counties have to either follow or have the equivalent to that model. So the state has a model. Pierce County definitely has a manual, and I suspect some of the other jurisdictions will have a manual. Oftentimes, the cities will simply say, we're going to adopt the King County manual. So you go to, Issaquah maybe, and instead of them having their own personal manual, they'll just say, follow King County's manual. So all of the counties will have a stormwater manual, which will tell you how to do it. If you're an engineer. If you're not an engineer, good luck opening that manual and trying to make heads or tails out of it.
And again, Matt, both Matt has good recommendations. I do as well. If you need a civil engineer, you need a biologist. Again, we're talking, Matt works all the counties. I'm mainly in King, Pierce, Kitsap, Thurston, but is the next question, is there any way to build on a lot? This is a great question, but again, we're going to do these. We're going to have you rapidly answer if you can. We'll try to get as many of these in the last 6 minutes. Is there a way to build on a lot where most of it is wetland? If so, how?
Okay, it's called a reasonable use exception. Pretty much all of the jurisdictions will have a vent or an outlet for a situation where I simply can't comply with your critical area regulations. And very often you'll see there's a wetland and then there's the buffers around a wetland. You could build on the buffer, but it's a buffer, okay? And so you go in for a reasonable use exception and oftentimes to the hearing examiner, and you say, Mr. Examiner or Mrs. Examiner, I'm really sorry, but I need to build a house on this and you need to let me, and here's a place I can build it, but it's in a buffer. And so you can ask for a reasonable use exception. The hearing examiner may or may not give it to you, or they'll give it to you and then force you to mitigate by enhancing the remaining buffer, putting a fence around your yard and stuff like that. So it kind of goes to like eminent domain or regulatory taking is what we call it. They can take half your property for a wetland and they're not going to pay you a nickel for it, right? That's just the law. Really sorry about that. But they really have a hard time saying, we're going to condemn your property to, you can't use it at all. Once they get to that point, they want to have an escape valve, and that's called a reasonable use exception.
So good. I just went through this process with mine, and you guys, Matt, you helped me write the easements for the septic systems, but the hearing examiner met with me to build into the wetland buffer, and they did approve it. But we were after 12 months worth of work, it was all writing on that decision. If that hearing examiner had said, declined, we would have been, So I got some more questions for you.
Wait. There's in that what the process you went through was a wetland variance, which is another term for the safety valve when you just don't have any choice. Okay, so and again, I can't remember what kind of mitigation they did, but oftentimes you'll work with staff to figure out reasonable mitigation, take it to the hearing examiner, and they'll approve it as long as staff is going along with it.
Yeah, it was huge to have Scott Systems be the one that was behind it, just because he'd written it all up. So as you said, all that is left is problematic land like wet and steep. Who is the first person company you would recommend to call to help evaluate the feasibility on the back of a napkin without spending a small fortune? Matt, you said you usually do these feasibilities for a couple $100, right?
I'm withdrawing that comment.
No, can't do that now.
I'll do that for existing clients. I'm kind of fearful. Also, you've been kind of like saying, call Matt if you want a referral. Don't call Matt for a referral. all of my consultants are so busy. I have a hard time getting them to do my work, let alone your work. So civil engineering firms are the place to start, or survey firms are the place to start if you're going out into the market for this kind of stuff. They have, oftentimes they will have on staff land use planners and other people that are very familiar with the permitting process. And if you go into them and talk to them about a scope and what they could do for you, if you can get in the door. All the doors are basically locked these days because they're just so busy. And I'll tell you frankly, you know, those kind of companies, they're really not interested in the onesie twosie. You know, I mean, they're so busy doing stuff for commercial builders and national builders and stuff like that. It's hard for me to get their attention. And so don't feel affronted when, you know, you don't get the service you think you ought to, because it's tough. It's very tough out there.
It is, but I think one of the things I'll say is that just to answer that question, like for you and I'll brainstorm, and like we said, the possibility in 4 or 6 weeks to look at, you know, maybe doing the next one is chapter 3. You know, one of the things I'd love to hear from those of you guys that are left, if you would text me, you know, hey, this, you know, I'd love to hear class 2 be about, you know, he has 6 different chapters there, you know, so he covered chapter 1 today. Chapter 2 is dissecting raw land purchase and sale agreement with earnest money and feasibility contingency. Chapter 3, undertaking feasibility studies for real property development. That has a lot to do with those resources of like the GIS, learning how to do the GIS, other resources. And I wouldn't mind if we did that class, you know, coming with people that I know that will help you with a feasibility for a couple $100 that are out there. You're right, it's busy because a lot of people want to build right now because the market's so freaking crazy. Subdivision of land, chapter 4. I'll let you look at the other chapters, but I'd love to hear from those of you guys that are left as to what things you'd be interested in. And it's 2:30, so we're gonna have to go. And Matt, thank you so much for your time today. Just really appreciate everything you've done. And everybody who's left, I'll be sending out a note. We'll probably, because Matt spent a lot of time, the next one might be $10, something like that, to help just offset Matt's hours and hours of time spent here. To be a gift, to say thank you. That, you know, I think that'd be something I would be worth doing. So, but we'll let you know about the next class. So thanks so much. I hope it was helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate you setting this up, Sarno.
You bet, buddy. See ya.